All right, good afternoon. Appreciate you guys coming to the 1 o'clock session. This was a good choice after lunch. These guys are going to keep you awake. It is risk management tools, and I'm just going to turn it over to the value management group to introduce themselves. So Andrew, I'll let you take it over.
All right. Woo. Good afternoon. Mic check. Apparently this does work. All right. I want to introduce myself. Andrew Foles. I work with the Value Management Unit. I am the program engineer for both risk management and also our value engineering program. With me today is Caitlin Meyer. She's one of our embedded consultants working for GeoDecisions, and Allison Tamer, the state value management engineer. So thank you guys for being with me this afternoon. I'm not sure if being right after lunch is a blessing or a curse. If I'm boring, you guys are probably going to fall asleep and not remember that. But if I'm good, you guys will hopefully stay engaged and everything else, so it'll be good, right? So kind of a win-win, right? I'm going to go with that. All right. So today, the purpose of our session is really to get folks into a risk mindset. It might help, though, if we have a common understanding of what risk is. So we're going to talk about what is risk, and also we're going to talk about some of the ways we can track risk on our projects. We're also going to go over a little bit of practice for this. We're going to introduce an example project, and it's going to be a little more interactive than maybe some of the other sessions that you've been used to, so I'm excited about that. I hope you are too. And then we're also going to talk about some other resources you guys can use when looking at risk for projects. All right, so what is risk? Can I get a volunteer? What is the first thing you think of when you think of risk? Anyone? Money, unknowns, I heard that. Anybody else? Brian? Something bad that can happen. Yeah, so that's what people think of, right? The negative things, so money, if you don't have enough money, things like that, right? So risk as a definition, it is an uncertain event. Now, it could positively or negatively affect a project. Now, it's a possibility that has not happened yet. If you have an event during your project that you know will happen, that's not a risk. That's something you're going to have as a milestone, right? It could be knowable or unknowable. It could be something that is known as well. So if it's known, that means your project team, while you're doing your project planning, has already looked into it and you know about it. Everyone's communicated that together. If it's unknown, someone on your project team probably knows about it, but it has not been communicated. It's not been documented. You guys are not all on the same page about that risk. Unknowable risk. It's the downside of going out for lunch, right? Unknowable risk is something that, well, it's hard to plan for. Maybe it's a natural disaster or something like that, that you're not going to be able to have as much of a understanding of that and be able to plan for that in your project. So we don't typically look for those. Now, this does bring us to an important point when talking about risk. Communication is key. So the biggest risk that we look at is a failure to communicate. If your team is not talking across all the different disciplines, if your stakeholders are not involved in your planning process, whether it's your county, your MPOs, your RPOs, things like that are part of this process, you're going to have some blind sides that hit you, those unknown risks, right? And of course, why is capturing risks important? So with our risk, as long as we're talking together, we're going to increase our communications. We're going to increase our continuity as well, and we're going to increase our understanding of that project, right? There's several steps in the risk management process that we promote here at NCDOT, specifically with value management. The risk management planning step, this is your starting point. This is your plan for how you're going to capture risk going forward on a project, though you can use this process for capturing risk for other things like programs and things like that. Did any of you guys go to the digital delivery and the OpenX session earlier today? They had talked about how they used a program just like this, the steps just like this, the process, in order to capture the risks that they had in their implementation of their program. So the risk management planning piece, that's the start, right? Everyone's on the same page. Your entire design team is understanding how you're going to capture the risk and what's expected. Risk identification, your team is, again, going to communicate what are all the different risks that you're going to experience on this project? What are all the uncertainties that you have for this project or program that you're looking at? And that could be coming from different disciplines, different technical areas. That could be coming from stakeholders. So there's a lot of different areas you could be pulling those out of, and you're just making a list. You're writing all of them down. Next step, when we get to risk assessment, essentially what you're doing is you're taking those risks and you're looking at the probability and the impact to your end product or your end project, right? With risk assessment, you're going to really key in on how likely is going to happen. That's your probability. And what impact or how big of an impact is going to have when this happens or if this happens. If it's going to cancel your project, that is a huge impact, right? Versus if it's something that's just going to set your project back a little bit or change some deadlines, maybe it's not as significant of an event. Once you have that captured, you can kind of see which risks are going to be most important to track and to monitor, because you can take your impact, you can take your probability, and you can develop a score from that. And on the risk assessment worksheet that we have put together, it will do all those numbers for you, for those of us that are actually going to use that for projects, things like that. And then, like I said, that can basically rank order your projects from most significant to least significant. And that way you'll have a better understanding of which of those risks you want to take into account and start designing a strategy for. That's the next step. Looking at those risks, looking at which ones are the most likely or most impactful to your project. And you want to make sure that you're either reducing the impact or reducing the probability, and you do that through a strategy plan for that. And you also assign an owner for that risk, someone that's going to track it, someone that's going to take into account everything that you guys, that your project team has basically come up with for that strategy. There's different ways and different opportunities, or sorry, different ways and different types of strategies you can use, whether it's a mitigation, you're trying to reduce the probability or the impact, whether it's avoidance, you can basically take that risk and you can make it no longer a risk because you're going to avoid the entire issue, whatever that is that could happen. If it's a positive risk, these are opportunities, you want to maximize the likelihood that it happens, right? If there's something in your project that will reduce the schedule or reduce costs, you want to maximize that. You want that to happen, right? It's positive. So you'd have a strategy that would go along with that to make that more likely. Once you have put together your risk strategy, you've assigned a risk owner, the risk monitoring and control step is more of a holistic look back at your project. As you go through the different design phases in pre-construction for a project, you're going to keep looking at all those risks and you're going to update them. You're going to update your strategies, and occasionally you're going to come up with new risks, add them to your list, add them to the tracker or the register, whatever you're using at the time. Hopefully it's our risk assessment worksheet, right? And you could do that quarterly, you can do that monthly. If you think it's necessary, you can even do it weekly, although I'd say that's probably pretty significant investment of time and effort on that. Much of this process is captured on the risk assessment worksheet. And for those of you guys that have seen that before, we used a tool that is an Excel spreadsheet. You can actually see the headers of that on this slide here. And it walks you through the process, had instructions and everything. And this is what we had been using for most of our projects and also for any of the other programs that were interested in tracking their risks. And it's a good starting point. This isn't an end-all be-all, and that's why we wanted to help make it even better. So that's part of what we're talking about today, or what I'm briefing you guys today on, is we have a new online risk assessment worksheet. And this is going to be tied to each project that's in pre-construction. So you guys are welcome to use either the Excel version or you can use the new online version. And I'll tell you guys a little bit more about that in the next slide, I think. Yep. So where you'll find the online version is on the pre-con dashboard. To find that, go to the Connect site for your project. Click on pre-con dashboard on the right-hand side. You can kind of see that in the left over here. On the left, you'll see the pre-con dashboard, and then once you get to that, you can click on risk assessment. I'm going to go backwards for just a second. It'll come up with this worksheet right here. It won't be filled in. You won't have all these nice risks already filled out for you. That's for you guys to do. But that's where you start. I see a question? Okay. All right. Now what we're going to do, since I've kind of given you guys an example of what we're looking for with risk, what we're kind of going over, I'm going to give you guys an example project. Mr. Garland Haywood has been nice enough to volunteer this project that he's working on. This is a bridge replacement project in Charlotte out at Division 10, BR 0189. It is a complete bridge replacement, and Garland, correct me if I get anything wrong, okay? I'm going to try to do my best to brief this correctly, though. The road itself is Beatty's Ford Road over North Carolina 16 and CSX rail spurs. This is a view of that bridge looking south on NC 16. You can actually see the water tower, which is actually a historic landmark. We'll talk more about that in a second. So with this project, it's a pretty significant bridge, a pretty important bridge for the city of Charlotte. The road itself is owned and maintained by the city, but the bridge is a responsibility of the NCDOT. It goes over 2 CSX spurs. You can kind of see that in the dashed yellow line. It is also one of the limited crossings for that area over NC 16. There's two neighborhoods right here that it's basically connecting. So if we take this bridge out, when the bridge is replaced, there will be no direct connection for these 2 neighborhoods in this area. Additionally, there's, I believe, 2 historic properties, the Excelsior Club and the Vest Charlotte Waterworks as well are in this area. There's low probability of bat and T&E species presence based on the initial evaluation we looked at. There are streams in the area, but none of them are intersecting at this project site at least. For public and community spaces, there is a church. You can kind of see it in the blue house just south of the project in the center here with the red. There's also some planned transit routes. I believe it's Charlotte's Gold Links network is going to be planning some bus stops to the north of the bridge. Currently, it stops to the south, but they are eventually going to be going to the north as well. And one of the things I guess I forgot to mention is this is a 4-lane road, Beatty's Ford Road, so the bridge itself is a 4-lane, no median, right? No median, okay. But sidewalks on both sides, right? 5-foot sidewalks? Yes. Okay. All right. So what we're going to do now is we're going to have a breakout session. I'm going to assign teams that are going to look at specific areas of risk. What I want you guys to do is just think through the different things I've kind of told you guys about what risk is, come up with a risk for this project in your group. So don't worry, not each of you is going to have to come up with one, but your group will come up with one together. We're going to pack out, we're going to just send out some packets of information. You guys can look over the instructions themselves on the sheet as well. But the goal is for you to come up with what we call an if-then statement risk. The reason we say if-then statement, if you have a when statement, when this happens, that's not a risk, that's an event that will happen, right? But if it's an if this happens, then this is the impact, you know you have a risk, right? Because it's an uncertainty. Let's see, what else did I say? Oh, risk can either be a threat or an opportunity. So remember, a threat is negative, an opportunity is positive. And then if you can, do your best to determine the likely probability and impact. And I'll show you kind of how our sheet will automatically go through and calculate a score, a risk score for each of those. Did you want to go ahead and we can pass them out? All right. So we'll go ahead and pass those out real quick. So the first group, I'm going to steal this mic if I can. If I can is important. All right. So the first group, can I get, let's see, the first 5 rows over here, if you guys can work on construction and constructability for a risk. I'm sorry, pardon me. All right. Can I get the next, can I get the next 3 rows? Let's see, I think Garland, that's you, and then the 2 behind you, excuse me. If you guys can work on environmental risks. And then for the back of the room on the right-hand side, if you guys can work on project management risks. And if you guys have any questions, just raise your hand. We'll try to help you out. For the front half of the room over here, if you guys can work on right-of-way, utilities, and railroad, and just come up with 1 risk as a group. And then for the back 2 rows over there, if you guys can come up with a technical group risk. And one of the things after you guys come up with your risk, you'll have you should have a map that shows you the area. On page 2, so on page 2, you guys, you're going to look at the risk identification. Remember which group or which category I gave you. If you have questions of which one that is, just let me know. We can tell you guys that again. Come up with the if-then statement on page 2. Just the if-then statement for your risk. In other words, if you don't leave on time, you may not get to work without hitting lots of traffic, right? Threat or opportunity, just identify that on page 2 as well. The status for this is going to be active for now. And then for the bottom, the risk assessment, just do your best to look at probability and impact and where that's going to go. Which one, this?
All right, everybody, if it wasn't clear, different voice to make everybody pay attention. Your goal in your small group is to complete page 2 of the larger packet that you received for 1 risk for your assigned category. Everybody clear on what their category is on their group? Raise your hand if you are confused, and we will come around and help you, okay? And you're gonna have about 20 minutes to go through this. If you finish page 2, you can move on to page 3. Page 3 is the mitigation approaches that we were talking about. Also, if you get stuck on your category, in your packet, there are risk examples for each category to kind of get you thinking. So we gave you a little bit of help there. And we have pens. If you would like to take notes, we will come around and hand them out. All right, thanks, guys. Good luck.
If you guys get stuck, if you if you flip back to the last 2 pages, there are some examples or some starter risks you can look at on the very back. So if you get stuck or you get confused with exactly what the different topics are talking about, if you look in the very back, it should show you what those different topics, just some risks that we've seen in the past.
Hey, everybody. Hello. Oh.
Yeah. All right, groups, as you guys are starting to get to your risks and write them down, the next step, what we're going to have you guys do as you guys finish up, we're going to have a volunteer from your group come up and actually take a few seconds and actually write it in. We're going to pull up the tool, the new online risk assessment worksheet, and we'll let you guys have a volunteer from your group come up and actually type in your risk. And then if we can't get a volunteer, you can stand up and tell me, and I'll type it in if you absolutely have to. But it reduces some of the fun. We can't make fun of you if you don't actually walk up. So you guys got a couple more minutes. A few more minutes, and then we'll ask for those volunteers. What's that? All right, guys. What I'm going to do for you up on the screen is I'm going to show you where on each of your projects, for those that are on the project, different project teams, where the pre-con dashboard is. I'm going to use an example project for this. But if you go to the pre-construction Connect site, you can actually search for, in this case, we're going to use our example project. I think it's U1000.
Yeah, one thing to note for this project.
It doesn't have a
it's very
site?
early, as I'm sure Garland shared with his group, so we don't have a project site, those types of things yet. We're going to use a test project for this. And as we go through, this will look the same on any project that you're working on. So if you go into Connect today for your current project, the risk assessment worksheet should be there for you to start populating.
Yes. So for this one right here, we went to the actual Connect site page, the front page. Yeah, it says access denied, so we'll see. On the left-hand side, it says pre-con dashboard. You're going to select pre-con dashboard. Let's see. And then down here, risk assessment. And so this is a new project, and this is actually just an example project. So this is where you go to actually put it in. New risk, and as you can see, this looks a lot like the sheet of paper that we handed out. You have your risk category, you have your if-then boxes, you have your threat and opportunity selector. It's automatically going to say active down here because it is being actively tracked, right? And then you have your risk assessment just below, all right? So do we have a volunteer from our first group that wants to come up here and type it in? Demo it for us.
And if you were already using the Excel sheet, hopefully all of these fields look familiar to you. It's just instead of a column on the Excel sheet, you got a place on the form.
Constructability.
Can you guys actually see that? It's a little blurry. Oh, there it is.
Is that better?
There it is.
Ah.
So just risk came up when you guys were talking, and then you had to narrow it down. You think of a lot of different things, and then figure.
The best part about having someone else up here typing is I get to make fun of their typing skills. You should see mine. They're not great. So yeah, I think Caitlin brought up a great point. As you guys are going through this, you probably saw a bunch of different risks that you all thought of all at the same time, and you're trying to capture a whole bunch. I was talking with, forgive me, is it Douglas? Doug? Douglas, excuse me. So I was talking with Douglas earlier, and he's working on a large project and actually used the risk assessment worksheet. He was telling me his project team came up with over 200 risks for their project. And that's awesome. You're going to have that, especially early on in a project, or if the project is a large or complex project. But by bucketing, his team actually used a kind of a bucket strategy to help put all these different risks into different buckets and that make it more manageable. That's one way you can do this. Also, how many of you guys felt like you did not have enough information on this project? Yes, right? So this is a brand new project and you got briefed by someone that does not know the project very well, right? So if you had the project manager in your group, you got a little bit of a bump there, but this is a preliminary project. It just started. And so this is what's going to happen in real life as you try to identify your risks. If you don't have a lot of information, you're going to have a lot of risks, right? And your risks are going to be very general because you just don't know enough. As you get more information, you're able to pare down your risks. You're able to change and look at the different strategies and refine them and as you go, right? All right, so can we get a volunteer from our second group to come up and type in?
And as that person's going to have just a couple things to note here. So come back in and update these over time. Turn them off, and if you got to the third page, you would have seen the action plan and also this update and comments field down here. This is a really good place to kind of log actions associated with that risk over time. Say we talked about it in this meeting and made a resulting decision, or we talked about it and we're not looking at that alternative that we thought was going to be a risky alternative for us. So use that as your log, and then I'll invite whoever else wants to come up. Come on down.
Don't worry, it'll be short.
I expect the joke that I'm not the best public typer. Public typing.
Right. And while we're doing this, while Jeff's typing and we're all staring awkwardly at him, to make it less awkward, anybody have any questions about about using this site, about any of the other things we've been doing so far? It said, oh, good question. The score was 25. So out of 25, 25 is the highest. So you put very high on the probability and very high on the impact. That means it's a 25. In other words, it gets 5 points from the probability and 5 points from the impact. Those are multiplied together to give you your 25. So I know that's a bit, you have to understand what the scale says, which is why we color-coded it. Obviously, red is bad. I know red gets such a bad rap.
The matrix for how we get that score is actually linked in here. I can show you that once he gets out of this screen.
So you can score with those buttons for the ratio.
Yes.
Thank you.
Oh.
All right, so we got risk number 2 here. We'll ask the next group to start coming up, our project management group in the back.
Does somebody want to volunteer from our project management group? That's pretty typical, actually, to have all threats.
So for
Any
the
question?
question about the risk matrix and how we got there, this is the
Uh-oh, lost it.
everybody sign up for it. Right?
Technical difficulties are the best. This is what happens with technical difficulties. So, did you say we had a question?
Hey, we had a question. So we had a question that was, is our team, value management, going to be the ones to come in and validate all of these? No. There's a lot of projects in the state, and there's 4 of us, so that's a no. But what I will tell you is the role that value management plays in risk management program is we provide tools for project managers and project teams to be able to effectively manage risk on their projects. That is our goal. That's our vision for risk. So it's an interactive process. As project managers are utilizing our tools and want to see improvements or have ideas, we welcome that. We will hopefully be developing some training. We're going to have a lunch and learn on this and just try to keep getting more information about risk management, the tools that are available, and just keep increasing that process. So, and then also the other piece of that is, as a project manager or project team, if you would like to take a deeper dive and have like a risk workshop scheduled, you certainly can do that within your group or your consultants or whoever, but we do have consultants on contract who do that, and so we can organize that for you and just take that load off, basically.
So we did identify a bug. You gotta love new software and things that are out there. In the future, when you click this little eye icon, a chart will come up and tell you about the matrix itself. For some reason, I'm looking at our friends in the back. For some reason, it's kicking the page. I don't know what's going on, but it will be there in the future. And it is currently in the Excel workbook. Excel workbook hasn't gone away. So,
Right.
who's our next volunteer? Okay. Woo!
Come on down. Yes.
Are we foreseeing the department's PMs starting this process and adding risk or consultants, PMs, or a combination of both?
Good question. So is it Frank? Frank asked, are the DOT PMs going to do it? Are the consultant PMs going to do it? Who's responsible basically for adding all the risks, right? So there has already been the risk assessment worksheet in the Excel form out there as a tool for project managers, project teams to use. The idea, and like Allison kind of mentioned, the vision is everyone is going to be able to, if you can get to the project site, you can add a risk. Project managers, we're going to kind of leave that up to them on how they want that carried out. Whether that's going to be, department project managers, whether that's going to be for, they're going to get their team together, they're going to actually grab somebody from all the technical disciplines and actually get stakeholders in the room and sit down at a table and do exactly what we're doing and type all this in. That's up to that project manager and that project management team. We're not going to dictate how they do it. But the idea is that at some point during your project, especially for a project that has some complications or it looks a lot more than just a simple repaving project maybe, if it has any kind of complexity, we really want you guys to look at using the risk assessment tools that we have. And this is just one of them. And part of the reason we went to a web-based form versus the risk assessment worksheet in the Excel form is I lose where I put my files all the time, whereas this is actually in the project dashboard. So I can't forget where to put this. It's always in the same place for that project. Additionally, if I have a local copy of the Excel file saved on my machine, but I didn't share it with the rest of my project team, they can't see it. They can see this, right? Anybody that has access to that project can see this. So.
And the other thing I would say too, so hydraulics has their new hydraulic planning tool or form or whatever it's called, and they have a place on there for risk, and there's risk that's identified during planning. And so if you are a technical discipline and there is risk on a project related to your discipline, then please do make sure you are sharing that in your team meetings with your project managers. But ultimately, DOT has, I guess, tasked project managers with being responsible for quality, risk, budget, schedule. There's a fifth one, I don't remember. So that's, that is on them. But as a team, and again, somebody on the team, just make sure that you're speaking up for the risk that are related to your stuff. Because you know your stuff better than they're going to know your stuff.
So is there a particular way to maybe have an input that doesn't go up, but goes to an approval for a project manager to review before it gets approved and placed on this, or?
So your question isn't where I thought it was going to go, but I think it hits on a point that I want to emphasize. When you first come in here, the only required field when you start this is the if field. So if you're a discipline and you're like, I need to make sure this gets on the board and I don't want to forget it, put a generic something in the if field. You're not going to give the information for a score. That gives the project manager an immediate indication if this is something we still need to talk about. So use that if field as a placeholder. We did talk about approvals and all of that, and we really wanted to kind of just keep it simple from the get-go. So it might be something we think about in the future if you guys start working on this and you think that's helpful. But as he said before, individual project managers will tell you how they want risk management to work on your project. We're not saying you must use these tools that are out there. If someone's got a better one, feel free to use it. But it is a good resource for everybody to see it at the same time. And that's what we're trying to do.
Okay, at the top,
Yes.
We take that for only $2 off the program.
So.
Can it be done as early as feasibility? I mean, it all.
Yes. Oh, yeah. So the question was, when can this be done, or when should you do it? Feasibility is a great time to start it. We actually have, there is an aspect of risk management that gets looked at on the project scoping reports. So some of that is already going to be captured at that location, or that time, and is written in the actual project scope, or the scoping reports rather. As soon as a project manager gets assigned a project, they should start with this. I would recommend.
This
That's the kicker for this particular, that's the only downside right now of these is that for instance, we didn't go to Garland's project because it currently doesn't have a connect site. So we can't put these in the connect site. We're using a template right now.
It is on the pre-construction project sites.
Right.
And the goal in the future is that this is going to carry forward into construction. We're not there yet, but the idea is it will work similar to the project commitments tracker. If you're familiar with that any open risks at the end of pre-construction could be ported over into the construction phase for their awareness. But right now it is just connect pre-construction. So the way that risk would carry forward right in today's time from feasibility design, this project didn't have one. Again, why we don't have preliminary plans for you guys. But if you have a feasibility design, there's a section in that project scoping report, as Andrew mentioned, that's related to risk. That's going to be in the project manager's bag of tricks, right? When they first get the project and use that to start populating your initial raw.
For new projects that have had feasibility studies.
Yes.
Let me just say that, because that process didn't get introduced until we started with our IPD or PDN process. So if you have a project now that's coming in and the feasibility study was done years and years ago, it wouldn't have it. The scoping report wouldn't have it, so.
But if there is a connect site for the feasibility study, they could be doing this, and then when it became a CIP project.
I think these are only on.
But the only way.
Yeah, no, I'm sorry, Allison. These are only on the pre-construction project. So if the project has a pre-construction site, it'll have this. If it's in feasibility,
There are feasibility studies with the pre-construction site. It's just FS,
if
whatever it's called.
So
It's not CIP.
technically, it's the conceptual express design site, and in a technical world,
It-
those two things don't automatically talk. We would have to do something systematically to make that.
Connect and it looks exactly
And-
the same.
and
You have to go to
it is
pre-construction.
Rightfully confusing. I didn't want that to
Yeah,
go off.
yeah,
But
that's
it-
why we started at pre-construction. So if you go to pre-construction, you type it in, it shows up. That one should have it. If you type it in, just connect, and it goes to the feasibility study or it goes to the construction right now. Neither construction nor feasibility have it right now. It's just pre-construction. There we go. Any other questions, sir?
I was curious, so each project is unique, but I imagine there's trends throughout the whole state. So are you guys collecting these risks? So they can be identified or, you know.
I'm getting okay for you since,
Not
if I got so much
just so that, you know, we understand, it's to identify those unknowns,
Right,
you're saying. Because,
right.
you know, someone in another division may identify a risk that a newer project engineer somewhere else may not have. Oh, I didn't even think about that. Someone else did have that.
Yeah, no, so Brian brings up a great question. If we're seeing risks that are kind of similar across projects, are we capturing that somewhere? So we do have a database to capture those in the CLEAR database. There's a risk section just for that. Risk disciplines, forgive me, a risk discipline just for that. I'm so glad we have very smart people here to help me out. I can't do this. But yes, no, we have that for folks that want to put in that risk that keeps showing up. Go ahead and type it in there. Now,
So they have to actually go and type it in.
yes, at this time, people would have to actually go to the CLEAR database and type it in. However, we are trying to do our best to, if people have really good ideas, that's right. Yeah, we're trying to get there. We're trying to get there. All right, we have, ends at 2, right? All right, we have just a few more questions. Sir? Good question. So Burke's asking on what projects is this going to be on? This is not a requirement right now. This is just a tool to help out project managers. So I recommend it, but then I'm a little biased because I'm the risk management program manager.
You really should be doing your risk assessments on every project.
It is a best practice. It is a best practice. But we're not forcing you to use this. We're not forcing you to use the actual Excel raw. You can use whatever makes the most sense for you. We're providing this because we think this is probably one of the more helpful things when it comes to capturing risk.
Yes. A couple of things to point out, and then I'm going to let Andrew take it home for the last 2 minutes here. All these columns are sortable, so use that as you time anybody comes in here and makes a change, for instance, if I'm the risk owner on this one and I want to come in and I'm going to say, held field meeting, and I'm going to come down, and hit submit. You'll see at the bottom there, it logged me, so we do have some log tracking for you to say, who went in and changed this thing? Look to the chart at the bottom of the page for that. That could be helpful for the project manager as well. I'm going to get Andrew you back up here. And wrap it up. Thank you guys for doing questions. You all hang out if you have more questions at the end.
Yeah. Like we mentioned, we went over our online risk assessment worksheet. You guys are still welcome to use the Excel tool. For instance, that's what OpenX was using for their risk assessment earlier, if you guys went to that session. The other thing we want to mention is we do have a risk management guide. It's on our Connect site, so please go there, visit that. Ask us more questions if you have any that aren't covered there, but it should have a pretty good explanation as to why risk is important, what kind of risk you should be looking at, and then some commonalities that we've seen across projects that are there. Speaking of commonalities, oh, it's not up here. We have a study that's being done by NC State that's looking across all of the, I think it's the special assessments and supplemental agreements. I'm sorry, I'm thinking of the wrong thing. Supplemental agreements and the claims, and looking at the different categories that those fall into. And I think that's really fascinating. I think it'd be really helpful for tracking risks going forward, things that people are looking at. We will have a lunch and learn on that in the future. So more to come on that. And then, of course, like I mentioned, the CLEAR database. If you have any risk-related lessons learned you want to add to this, there is a new risk discipline that you can put those under as well. So that way, if you have a fellow project manager you want to share that with, throw it in there, and we can use it there.
All right, and we're at the end of our time, but Value Management Office is happy to keep answering questions. Contact us, and we'll happy to help you on an individual project or just with general questions. Thank you guys for your time.
Thank you, guys. If you guys could help us out, if you moved a chair, if you guys don't mind putting it back, I don't want the next group to have questions about what we were doing. Thank you, guys.